Hey, what's up, y'all? Thanks so much for joining me on today's video where we're going to take a look at how to get Ableton Live talking to processing. To do that, we're going to use a couple things. On the Ableton side, we're going to use the udpsend object inside of a Max for Live device, and on the processing side, we're going to use the oscP5 library. Once we've got those set up, we'll be able to communicate with other machines on a network using the OSC or Open Sound Control messaging protocol. Right? So as we get started here, let's first talk about just the two pieces of information we're going to need whenever we want to communicate between machines that are on the same network, right? We need the IP address and the port number, right? So the IP address is just kind of telling my machine, where is your machine on the network? What's the address of the other machine that I want to send this message to? And the port number is kind of like telling the machine, well, once I get to the right address, where should I drop this message off? Front door, back door, side door, on the porch, in the garage, right? Wherever, where do I need to actually deliver this message once I get to the right place, right? So let's take a look at how we're going to use those two pieces of information inside of our Max for Live device. We'll go ahead and we can select an audio track in Ableton, drop a new Max audio effect on there, and open up the editor. Should open this up for you. Let's make this a little bigger so we have some more real estate to play around with. And we'll go ahead and delete all this stuff because we don't need it. And in the inspector, I like to say open in presentation. All right, so all we have to do now is just create a new udpsend object, like so, and put in our two arguments, which are going to be the IP address and the port number. If I want to talk to myself, right, I don't actually want to talk to another machine on the network, and I'm just going to talk to my own machine locally here, the local host, we're going to use the address 127.0.0.1. And I know on my Mac here that my port 12,000 is an open one. You guys can Google, for your own operating systems or machines, with different applications installed, which ports are open. But generally 12,000 is an open port on Macs. So that's what we're going to use for today's video here, right? And once we've got that set up, that's basically all we need to do. Now what we can do is we can just create a new message, and I might say something like, hi. I'll connect that here to the inlet of my udpsend object, and if I lock the patcher, I can just now click my message, and I'm sending messages to myself at this address, at this port number, right? Okay, so this is really simple. That's all we really need to have set up for the udpsend object. So let's take a look at the OSC Wikipedia really quick so we can kind of take a look at what's going to actually go inside of these messages. So as you can see, OSC is a protocol for networking sound synthesizers, computers, and other multimedia devices for purposes such as musical performance or show control, yada yada, a lot of other stuff to read. There's a list of applications that use them, all very good information. I encourage y'all to come and check out. All we need to know for the video today, though, is that an OSC message consists of an address pattern, a type tag, and an argument, right? And so the address pattern is the name of the message. The type tag tells the computer like what is inside of the message. Is it a float? Is it an integer, right? And then the argument is just the actual message itself, right? So those three things: address pattern, type tag, argument. Let's take a look at how we might now format a little message in Max to adhere to that protocol. So instead of just saying hi, right, I might say something like, how about BG color? We'll use a message to change the background color in processing in just a moment, right? And then let me say something like $1. And then let me add a new live.dial, right? And I want this dial to output floats. So it's a float range, and let's make the unit style float. And then let's change the range here from 0 to 255, because I know that I'm going to want to send out values between 0 and 255. And then I can set this here, connect this dial to the inlet of my message. And if you want to see the message that's being sent, we can connect this here. And now if I lock my patcher, I should be able to change my dial, and you can see now I'm sending a message that says BG color, and it's got one float as its argument. Like so. And that's, of course, getting sent to the localhost at port 12,000. Okay, so now we've got this set up to send a background color. Let's see how we can get processing set up to receive this information. So let's make a void setup and void draw. And the next thing that we're going to need to do is go ahead and import the oscP5 library. If you don't have that installed, you can go to Add Library. This will open up the contribution manager. And you can just come in here and search OSC, and it should pop up oscP5. So go ahead and get that installed, update it if you need to, and then you should be able to import it into your sketch. So let's import oscP5. Right? The next thing that we'll need to do is actually create a object, a variable to store the OSC object. So we'll say oscP5 oscP5. Okay, so now we've got an oscP5 object in our sketch that we can now instantiate here in setup. So let's say oscP5 equals new oscP5, and we're going to tell it we're going to use this sketch, and we got to tell it the port number. So we'll say 12,000, because that's the port that we've set up here in our Max for Live device, 12,000. So we want to be sending things on port 12,000. We want to receive things at port 12,000 here. Okay, and so now if we want to actually listen for OSC messages that are coming into the sketch, we need to have another function called OSC event. And we need to give it a couple arguments. We're going to tell it that we're listening for OSC messages, right? And that we want to just name any of the incoming messages the OSC message. Now we need to start to parse these messages that are coming in. So we'll say if the OSC message dot check address pattern, right, is /, and in this case we're sending bg_color is the address pattern of our OSC message, right? If it is this, which it is over here, doesn't matter what's inside it, let's just say print the OSC message. Okay, so let's run our sketch and see what happens. Okay, so now I should be able to move this dial. Yes, excellent, right? And I am getting a message, right, with this address pattern and this type tag, right? So you can see the udpsend object just actually gives us the type tag automatically, right? So it said, oh, there's a float in here. I'm going to tell the OSC message that it's a float, right? So if I want to actually then further parse the message, what I can do is I can say, okay, so if we have the correct address pattern, let's check what the type tag is, right? So let's say if the OSC message.check type tag, in this case it's just a single float, right, is F, then let's do this. Let's actually get the argument, like let's get the message that's in this OSC message, or let's get the actual information. So we can say print line the OSC message dot get, right? And we're going to get the first thing, the first argument. You can actually put multiple arguments in one OSC message, but we just have one argument in ours right now, this floating point number here, right? So we're just going to get that first item, the first argument, and we got to tell it, processing here, we got to tell it what kind of information. So this is going to be float value. Okay, so we're saying if we have the right address pattern and we have the correct type tag, right, then I want you to go ahead and print this out. Let's see if that works. Okay, awesome. So now as I move my dial up and down, you can see I'm actually getting 22.08, right? 22.086615. So you can see I'm actually getting, right, the information that's being sent inside of that message. Okay, cool. So let's look at how we can actually use this, information to change things in a sketch. Let's come back here to setup, and let's say size 640 by 480. And let's say so a background color, right? So we're kind of changing the color here. Let's do this. Let's say float r equals 0. We'll initialize this as 0. And here in draw, we're going to make a background that has a red channel, R, and no green, no blue, right? And then here, BG color, float, instead of printing this value, I'd like for you to set R equal to it, right? So instead of printing this number, I'm going to set R equal to it, right? So let's see how that works. Okay, so we have our sketch here, and we've got our max for live device. If we now turn the dial up, it's going to send a value between 0 and 255. Okay, sweet. Let's do one more thing just for fun. Let's say, how about another float d equals 0. Actually, let's make this 10, right? And we'll say ellipse at width divided by 2, height divided by 2, dd. Right? So we're going to set the diameter of our ellipse here using this variable. And let's go back into our max for live device for just a moment and make a new message. So we're going to say, instead of background color, we can just say D, right? Because we're just naming the diameter here. And then here in our live.dial, let's change the output, right? So I don't actually want to ever hit 0. I'd like to go from 10 to, let's say, 300. Okay, and so now I should be sending a message with the address pattern /D, and it's going to have one argument here, which will be a float, right? Because I'm sending out floats from this dial. Okay, so let's see what that looks like in processing. I'm going to need to come in here, and I'm going to need to check for a different address pattern, right? So I can make a new if statement. I'll say if the OSC message.check address pattern is R, and as long as the type tag is one float, right? The argument just has one argument, it's a float. Get that first argument and set D equal to it. I typed that wrong. Should be D, not R. Okay, and as I move my dial, I can grow and shrink this shape, and I should be able to change the color of my background. All right, so this brings us to the end of our video today. I'll see you in the next one.